Good morning, my friends. I am wearing an older costume. This has been my Renaissance Festival performing outfit for the last 5 years or so. And you probably haven't realized, because there haven't been Renaissance festivals, but I had decided to discontinue the outfit. I am changing up my costuming for festivals, and the more ornate Elizabethan outfits you've been seeing lately have been the direction I am headed in. However, for this day and this recording session, I thought I would break out the older styles once again, because I just recorded a Facebook Live, which I'll also be sharing with you at some point. This Facebook Live where I was playing the Celtic and traditional music that originally got me started in my musical path. However, there is an interesting winding story from point A to point B, and I thought I would share it with you while also being thematically dressed. And what that theme is I started off, first of all, playing mandolin and noodling around, but very early on, saw this weird instrument in a catalog, Lark in the Morning. And I said, I need to have that. The problem was the mandolin was very pretty and a lot of fun, but I couldn't really sing with it. I felt that the pitch of my voice and the pitch of the instrument didn't go well together. Since then, I have seen baritone male voices that have sung very successfully and very well with the mandolin, and I wish I'd come up with the idea and taken it a little further. Not come up with the idea, but taken it a little more in that direction when I had the opportunity. But I didn't. I wanted something that had more of a guitar sound, and I saw in this catalog an instrument called a cittern. And in Lark in the Morning, I saw a cittern, not this particular cittern. This one came along a little later. The cittern I originally picked up in that Lark in the Morning catalog was, later I gave it to the Dubliner Pub in Cincinnati, Ohio, where for a number of years it was hanging above their front door. My friend Chris Noon and I had been performing there as the Rolling Scones, or the Roving Scones. We never could quite settle on one or the other. And one day at the end of the gig, the manager said, hey, do either of you have any old beat up instruments we could use for decorations? And I had beaten the tar out of that cittern, and it wasn't, to be honest, that great of an instrument to begin with. And so I didn't feel it was worth anything to sell it, but it had enough sentimental value that I didn't want to just give it away, until I realized I could go visit it at my favorite local pub. This one's actually missing the top two strings. The thing that makes a cittern, or at least a Celtic cittern, is the fact that the modern Celtic cittern has 10 strings. You can see on the headstock there are 10 tuning pegs. This one is technically tuned right now as an octave mandolin in a bouzouki tuning. Don't worry, you don't need to know what all that means. But it's a fun instrument, and it got me through the first 5 years of my career. I think that I started playing cittern probably in '96, and I discontinued it in 2005. My career, of course, only spanning part of that because I took a while between learning how to, no, not '96, probably '97, was living in North, never mind. Anyway, late '90s. Now, a little bit later on, I discovered the history of the Irish cittern, which is wrapped up in that of the Irish bouzouki. Now, the Irish bouzouki happened when an Irish musician was on vacation in Greece, and he ran across the Greek bouzouki, which has 6 strings. He custom commissioned one to have 8 strings and tuned it to a variation of a mandolin tuning. Not an exact tuning, but similar. Later on, another Irish musician decided to add another set of strings for 10 strings total. You can get a really nice 12-string sound. I wish that those top 2 strings were on so I could really demonstrate. It's got this ringing clear high note that goes through. And he didn't know what to call his instrument, but he saw in a book of historical instruments what was known in the late Middle Ages, what we would call the Renaissance, as a cittern. Basically, it's the direct ancestor of a mandolin. And so playing at Renaissance festivals and deciding to go in a more authentic direction, especially in my early SCA career, what I wanted to do was pick up an instrument that was a little more authentic to the period. And so I went online to the early music shop in England and picked myself up a cittern. and it's a little out of tune. And I have to say, getting my start off with an instrument that was tuned with friction pegs that weren't shaped to the standards of a modern violin, shall we say, let's be charitable, gave me an appreciation for once I switched to instruments with 40 plus and then later 60 plus strings. Didn't feel like that big of a stretch because I'd already been fussing with 9 of these pegs for a while. But the Renaissance cittern, as I said, is the ancestor of the mandolin. It's basically a variation of the lute family from an early offshoot. The musicology of it is kind of interesting, in my opinion, but I'm not necessarily going to bore you with it all today. Let's just say it's a fun instrument, and there's a lot of repertoire for it in 16th century surviving sources, 16th and 17th century surviving sources. In the 19th century, they rebranded a similar instrument as the English guitar, and you can see those instruments, which look a lot like the modern cittern, and use varying styles of machine tuning pegs. And you can occasionally find those at auction and online and on eBay, and they're fascinating and fun. But I got into the cittern to get more authentic, and then I decided that it wasn't quite fitting my needs, and I wanted to go in a different authentic direction, and that's when I picked up my first dulcimer. Again, not this dulcimer, that particular dulcimer met a tragic end because I knocked it over in a parking lot. It got all banged up. I replaced it. I broke that instrument by playing in a sudden rainstorm. I said, oh, I'll finish the song, and it warped the soundboard. And then I took the working pieces from Dulcimer A with the working pieces from Dulcimer B. It was not a pretty instrument, but it was functional, and I sold it to a friend as a beginner instrument. So my original idea with the dulcimer was, again, to get into a more authentic instrument. But I started off on the dulcimer, playing the music I'd started off with on mandolin many years prior, with a lot of the Celtic repertoire. I just noticed the dulcimer is kind of out of frame, so I'm going to reposition this very slightly. There we go. Et voilà. However, again, on my quest for authenticity, I started getting into period music with the dulcimer, a lot of dance music in specific, especially at the beginning, medieval music, the Cantigas de Santa Maria. Later on, I went into some really fancy lute music and got into the duophony and the polyphony. And really headed hard in that direction, later ending up in Baroque music and the rest of my period repertoire. But one thing that's always eluded me is the fact that the music is of the time period and the instrument is of the time period. But a 16th century hammered dulcimer had fewer notes. It had a 2 to 2.5 range, 2 to 2.5 octave range. And the instruments I'm playing, whether it's Maria or Antonietta, the instruments have 3 to 3.5. So a lot of the music that I'm playing, for example, this is not a chord that would be playable on a 16th century hammered dulcimer. And so I found that rather confounding, because I love the music and I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it's not technically fitting, and it's a medieval reenactor issue where at some points you just get pickier and pickier and pickier, and sometimes it takes you in some fun directions, and sometimes it just really, really gets on your nerves. However, this has just been a historical footnote I've made note of for the last couple of years, until I took it full circle and went back to the cittern, because the Renaissance cittern had a very limited range. The lowest note is G, the highest note is E above it. So you've got generally music that are written for 1.5 octaves, because you have the half octave within the notes, and then you have an octave that you can play up the neck. And so because of that, the cittern music fits within the range. The problem is the Renaissance cittern was played much as a modern ukulele. You may have seen me strum the chords a minute ago, and that's how it was played. It had a very chord pattern, ukulele kind of feel to it. The ukulele is a really apt metaphor in a couple different ways, but that's a different topic. So because it was played like a ukulele and I wanted to play on the dulcimer, it was similar to imagining taking a tune written for ukulele strumming and bringing it to violin. It's really hard to isolate parts. So I was digging through some 16th century music books the other day, like you do, and I found one. In 1564, Adrien Leroy in France, in Paris, put out 2 books for Citra, the cittern. And one of them, of 2 books of music, 1 song fit my criteria for meeting the range I was looking for a period dulcimer with the melodic nature that I was looking for rather than chords. And I learned it 2 days ago, and so this may not go as well as I'm hoping. But I'm hopeful. This is Les Forces d'Hercule, the Forces of Hercules. It's really also nice as something to put on an album title because it's obviously French, while every single word is a cognate in English. So you can immediately know what it's talking about while also having this little foreignness to it, which as a graphic design interested album cover kind of thing is a lot of fun. My next album, in fact, has a Latin title that I'm really pleased with because yes, I have already named the album to be recorded in 2022. That's the kind of person I am. But the title is in Latin, but the cognates work in English, Spanish, and Italian. I'm ridiculously pleased about it. This is Les Forces d'Hercule. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much for all your support. It's really a lot of fun, and I like the fact that recording the videos for all of you is giving me a certain rhythm and certain things to, certain goals to aspire to and work towards. As I mentioned, I do have a title for the 2022 album, and at this point I'm learning music at such a rate and writing music at such a rate that it might end up having to be a double album. Anyway, thank you very much again for everything. I appreciate you, and I look forward to us meeting again on the road when there are shows and when travel is a thing again. Thanks again.